Welcome back to Holistic Healing Association. I'm Erin Darcy. I'm certified in embodied processing and clinical hypnosis. Today I have with me Dr. Elyne, who is a teacher, an author, and specializes in somatic therapy. She's from the United States, and we will be addressing how developmental trauma and chronic stress can lead to chronic health and autoimmune diseases. Thank you so much for joining us. And can you tell us about yourself?
Hi, Erin. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Elyne Selu, and I live in New Orleans, Louisiana. Um, I became interested in health and wholeness when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. At that point in my life, I was 35 years old. I had had bizarre, crazy symptoms for years. And unfortunately, like many people who have chronic illness, I was misdiagnosed with it being a mental health issue. That happens to a lot of us. And eventually, I got the diagnosis of multiple sclerosis. And because I was relapsing so frequently, which meant that my T cells were breaking the blood-brain barrier and they were attacking the myelin sheath, the protective layer around my nerve endings. I was having increasing brain damage and disability. And so the doctors wanted to put me on chemotherapy, and that was really frightening for me. I was newly diagnosed. I didn't have a lot of good resources. So I was doing everything the doctors asked me to do, and I was taking a lot of medication. And a friend who was a nurse convinced me to get a Reiki treatment. And honestly, I was skeptical. But when I laid upon the table for that hour and received Reiki, it literally changed my life. Um, at that point, I was a technical writer for the federal government, and I also taught creative writing. I had written and published short stories and a novel. My life was very focused on the writing arts and also science and technology. Um, so I was very skeptical of Reiki, but it was the first time I had a very powerful kind of psychic meditative experience that showed me the connection between the stress in my life and what was happening in my body. And from that point on, I became obsessed kind of with that connection between mind and body. And I started to shed the things in my life that were stressful. I became a Reiki practitioner. I went through Hurricane Katrina. And after the hurricane, I was in Oregon and really pursuing complementary alternative medicine. I was really fortunate to have a naturopath and an acupuncturist. And so I decided to study Chinese medicine because Reiki is just about moving qi. And Chinese medicine is in many ways about understanding qi, how it shows up in the body, how it gets blocked, and how to move it. But the obsession, the question, what is the connection between trauma and chronic illness? And I was getting a Western medical understanding, I was getting a Chinese medical understanding, but it wasn't until I read When the Body Says No by Gabor Mate that everything clicked into place for me. And he even wrote about multiple sclerosis. And I did have the opportunity to meet Dr. Mate, and he's a really beautiful, present, kind man. And he was the first to explain the HPA axis, this understanding that if you have childhood trauma, that running of the cortisol and those other fight flight hormones really can mess up your immune system. And later, we know now, there have been studies done, 67% of people who have high childhood trauma, high ACE scores, adverse childhood events, they often end up with a inflammatory disease diagnosis. Multiple sclerosis, lupus, fibromyalgia, all of these autoimmune diseases, they're all have similarities in that they're inflammatory. And so they kind of fall under that umbrella. So I became very, very fascinated and wanting to treat that and learn that mechanism between the physiology and the anatomy, but also the spiritual, because we know that depression, that PTSD, that anxiety, that is soul loss. So you can't have the body without the soul, the psyche, somatic piece.
I would
And so
agree.
so I found myself at Pacifica studying somatic depth psychology and also kind of, finding that balance between the hard science and really getting into somatic experiencing and the neuroscience behind what's happening in our nervous system in that fight flight response, but also the spiritual, because how do we retell our story after trauma? How do we make sense of who we are after going through a really difficult time? You kind of have to rewrite the story of who you are. And so that's why I like both pieces of that.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
that's my story.
Okay, thank you. And can you tell us what is the science behind somatic
Mhm.
processing?
So, fortunately, this science is the theories are being challenged, and that's good. We want our science to be on top of it and correct. But right now, the understanding is that the amygdala, which is this lower part of the brain, it's one of the oldest parts of the brain. It has the wonderful name reptilian hindbrain. And reptilian's a good way to think about this part of our brain. It's the oldest part of our entire physical structure and consciousness. The thinking brain came much, much later in evolution. And so when we take ourselves back to this wonderful reptilian hindbrain, the amygdala, this piece of our brain kind of in the back, tucked in the back and protected, that's running the show. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, your amygdala is watching for danger. It's what's kept you alive. It's what kept your ancestors away from the saber-toothed tiger. It's what focused your ancestors on the hunt to get that bison or whatever. So this amygdala is a really beautiful survival piece that if you hear a floorboard creak in the middle of the night wakes you up. That's your amygdala. Unfortunately, what happens with those of us with neocortex is our thinking brain gets in the way. If you look at some animals and you see trauma, and you see, for example, this is the one they show us in our training, a gazelle being attacked by a lion. The gazelle escapes, the camera stays on view of the gazelle shakes it off. That is a normal trauma response. What happens in humans, we get attacked by the lion, we get hit by the car. Our parents are going through a divorce when we're 4, and their yelling feels like a physical attack on our delicate systems. Whatever the trauma is, we don't get that release. We don't get to shake it off. And then when you shake it off, your brain kind of reorganizes and the trauma or the symptoms of trauma are gone. It's just the memory. So, what is happening when we don't get to complete that trauma response physiologically, that fight, flight, freeze, even fawn mode gets trapped in our system. And so we're living out of that old story, and it's very unconscious. You might not know why, after a car accident, you can't sleep. And this goes on for 6 months. And then you get into therapy, and maybe your somatic therapist kind of walks around you and let you feel into where your blind spots are, where your protective space is. And when your therapist maybe gets to the side of you, you realize, oh, I feel a lot of fear there.
Mhm.
That's where the car hit me. And
Exactly.
so your body's able to acknowledge that, process it. You go into your room at night and you look around and you see that you have this big dark cabinet on that wall. And for some reason, it's triggering you. Maybe you just put a scarf on it or soften it. But it's a way of being with the body and the body's need to complete that traumatic reaction. And maybe the reaction was you wanted to pull away, but the seatbelt wouldn't let you. And so you have this response. And there's something about when you're asleep at night, that reaction is still alive in your nervous system. And so, through perhaps somatic therapy, you bring awareness to that reaction. You get to have that reaction. You get to have that physical, I'm pulling away from this car coming at me. And suddenly the system has relief. It got to finish the action.
Exactly.
So, that's the big piece of trauma. The other big piece that I think our culture is really struggling is Peter Levine, the creator of somatic experiencing, says that trauma happens in the absence of a compassionate witness. So many of us are walking around with these big hurts, but our culture doesn't give us space or people who have enough resourcing themselves to sit with us and help us process what has happened to us. And so that's the other piece. We've got the physiological piece that's happening where it's trapped in the nervous system. We also have the social psycho piece. We are herd animals. We are relational. We need one another psychically and spiritually, sometimes to heal the body, because it's
Support is
all
huge.
connected.
And
Yeah,
for
yeah.
everyone, for everyone watching at home, just like Dr. Elyne was saying about the exhale,
Mhm.
shaking. If you have an animal at home, particularly a dog, you will be able to observe this in your canine. Because if anything happens, even a little upset, after it's done, notice how your dog reacts. Often, they will shake their whole body. And that's just them settling back down their nervous system, shaking off that experience. And
Mhm.
the animals we get to live with at home, we can see this firsthand. Whereas in the wild, it can be a little bit more difficult. And I was shown exactly the same,
The same
maybe
video.
not the same video, but possibly it's definitely been around, but something very, very similar in our training
Mhm.
as well. What is the science behind people having chronic health problems and autoimmune diseases because of
Mhm.
chronic stress and trauma?
Right. And so I want to be very clear. Not everyone who gets diagnosed with an inflammatory disease has trauma. Unfortunately, we know that the majority of those people who are diagnosed either had high ACE scores, adverse childhood events that score pretty high. And that not only leads to inflammatory disease, it also can lead to heart disease and type 2 diabetes, that sort of thing. But not everyone has trauma. We also know that there's a higher incidence of women getting diagnosed with MS after losing a child. So that's acute trauma. And so we do see these scientific correlations and studies showing connections. But what's happening physiologically is, like I mentioned earlier, imagine that you're running these huge levels of fight flight hormones like cortisol and those endorphins. Those directly affect your other organs, your gut, your kidneys, your brain. And it sort of starts to program you to almost be oversensitive. to your environment. It's like your body is continually getting a message either from continued stress, like you see in children who grow up in war zones, or maybe kids who go through a prolonged divorce with their parents, whatever it is, um, or their caregiver not able to show up. So neglect also makes these fight flight hormones rage. So if you think about your system constantly being flooded, it starts to kind of reprogram the brain, the nervous system, the body, the gut. And so you have adverse health outcomes because of that. And so you see all of these. And I don't think it's purely just trauma. There are genetic components, there's epigenetics, there's environmental components. We know there are people who can grow up in the same kind of trauma situation and have great health for the rest of their life. So there's a lot of factors, but the general thinking right now, and it is again being looked at and re-examined. Not all the theories are 100%, but it's this constant dumping of stress hormones, or in an acute trauma like losing a child, this sudden dumping of stress hormones on a delicate system kind of tilts your immune system toward danger, danger, danger. Inflammatory, inflammatory. Everything's on fire all the time.
I know
Mhm.
personally speaking, a friend of mine, they grew up in a very abusive home,
Mhm.
physical, verbal, um, there was a lot.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he has diabetes.
Mhm.
Um, as fit as a fiddle, very active, eats very clean, has
Mhm.
diabetes.
Mhm.
So I believe it.
Yeah. 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 And even if it's purely anatomical, physiological, and that's what's so silly about the Cartesian method, is that you can't separate mind and body, which is what the Cartesian scientific model kind of does. We know that they're not truly separate, but even if you were to take a black and white physiological view of diabetes, no, we inherited it and it's a failure of your pancreas, able to metabolize. We have to look at the emotions of that. When you have a chronic illness, say you don't have an ACE score, you had a great childhood, say you don't have trauma, you still end up with MS. Having a chronic illness is traumatizing. The constant doctor's appointments, the not being believed, which most people with chronic illness, they struggle with this sort of dissociative gaslighting from our culture because we look fine, we must feel fine, but on the inside, we're on fire and we're just faking it and masking. Um, so there's that sort of thing that happens. And then there's, what happens in families when you're chronically ill, what happens with your finances when you're chronically ill. So there are all these structures that add stress to your body, and stress makes your symptoms feel worse. It's so interconnected. And so
Definitely. The body is a
treating the
whole.
whole person, yeah, the whole
That's how we
person.
heal.
Yeah.
And I know with this person in particular that I've been given permission to speak about, they also have a
Hmm.
very high A score.
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
have experienced a lot of emotional numbness, so repressed emotions,
Hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
diabetes did not run in their
Mm-hmm.
family. So these
Yeah.
are all signs
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
what you're saying, again, indicating
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
you in science is correct. Again, this is just another individual. However, I believe there are many.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
how does being attuned to ourself, how can that start to soften our symptoms?
I love that question. I also want to quickly go back to what you said about dogs.
Sure,
Animals teach us so much. So thank you for bringing in the
I
dogs.
agree.
That's
I
all.
love dogs.
And animals are great co-regulators.
They
So
can regulate off us very much as well. Like a child
yeah,
would regulate
absolutely. Yeah.
off us, so would
Yeah.
our dog.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to mention that because it's right up there. So I'll go back to your question if I can. Give me a reminder of that again,
Yeah.
your question.
So
Or
when we are attuned to ourselves, how can this
right.
start to soften our symptoms?
Thank you. And that's why I went to the dog. So one of the first things that we teach people in somatic experiencing, and if you yourself or your audience members would just like to take a moment and just notice your breath. Yeah, just notice your inhalation and how deep it can go.
As my dog crawls up behind me.
And then let that exhalation kind of fall out of you. Let it go. Just kind of settle more deeply into your seat. Yeah, yeah. Just notice where your body is in the chair, where your sit bones and lower back press into pillows or cushions or chairs.
My back's right behind my German Shepherd. He just crawled up behind me.
That sounds so yummy. I love big dogs. So just noticing your body. And now bringing your awareness to your limbs, maybe your legs, where your feet and limbs are connecting with the earth. Yeah. And when you're ready, notice your breath again. Notice how deep your inhalation feels.
All right, there's a difference.
Mhm. And on your exhalation, when it feels safe for you, go ahead and open your eyes and bring your attention back to the screen as it
Y-
feels safe. Mhm.
Yes, and calming, and
Yeah.
it just relaxes your entire body. And it was perfect time as soon as you were bringing me into that exercise. My dog Bailey, I'm not sure if it was shown in the screen, but crawled up right behind me and
I saw an
started
ear
cuddling
go
me.
by.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
raised dogs can
Yeah.
also be great resources. Um,
Yes.
but yes,
Yeah.
just dropping into the body. And I would
Yeah.
suggest practicing that a few times a day because that
Mhm.
alone and noticing what's happening in your body. And if there's a safe place in your body, like there was in my
Mm.
legs, and just
Mhm.
noticing how that feels and grounding in to the body can
Mhm.
make a world of
Yeah.
difference.
Absolutely. And so when we are attuned to ourselves, it's easier for us to attune to our children, our colleagues, our partners, the world around us. So many of us, especially those with chronic illness, are dissociated. We're not in our bodies. In fact, many of us intentionally dissociate just to get through the day. I do it all the time. And it's not until I come back and do a little meditation, a little breathing, I'll go, wow, I am really fatigued today, but I've been pushing through it. No wonder I feel cranky. And I'm blessed that I've had years of meditation and yoga and qigong to be with my body so that I can drop into that and just like how we did, just a couple of minutes. And it resets your nervous system. It brings you into the present moment. You stop future tripping with that anxiety, that fight flight reaction. You might come out of freeze where you're frozen, you're depressed, or you're procrastinating and you just don't know what to do next because you're overwhelmed. So, using your body as an anchor, using your breath as an anchor, and being compassionate. Maybe body is not a safe place. And that's true for a lot of people. So finding, like you suggested, you said your legs brought you safety. So finding a body part, it might only be your thumbs that feel
Mhm.
safe, and that's okay.
And that's a good starting
Maybe
place.
absolutely your thumbs. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
thumbs
you.
up,
Yeah,
two thumbs up.
thumbs up. Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, thank you. And how can being our authentic self,
Mhm.
how can that start to help us heal?
Being authentically yourself is terrifying, right? Because to be authentic means you have to kind of be present with yourself first. And so it takes a bit of looking inward, a bit of honest reflection, and to know who you are, to know what your flaws are, to know that um, maybe you're kind of cranky on days that you have to take out the trash. Who knows why? You hate taking out the trash. You're always cranky on that day. But just knowing that and accepting that about yourself. You hate taking out the trash, so you're not going to snap at your partner just because you hate taking out the trash, right? So it's just bringing an awareness to who you are, to your reactions. And so, in that authentic place, authenticity starts with your relationship with yourself. And the more that you can bring curiosity and compassion to who you are, then that authentic way allows other people to show up authentically and to be truly who they are and cranky on garbage day, if that's who they are.
And
Yeah.
not only that, but it makes people feel more comfortable to be around you because you're
Right.
genuine and you're authentic.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
if you're allowing others to be their authentic self as well, those are the people I'm comfortable with the most because we're fully accepting each other,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And to
Hmm.
be human, we have flaws. And to love and embrace ourselves and others, flaws and all, those can
Hmm.
be some of the most profound relationships
Hmm.
and having relationship with ourselves. And when we have development of trauma, it can be a struggle at times to know who our authentic self is.
Right.
With healing, starting our healing journey and going in the body,
Hmm.
it can make a world of difference to start to discover who we are. And do you have advice for people to help them discover who they are, their authentic self?
Take a flashlight. um, and by that I mean, don't be afraid to look at yourself. Don't be afraid to look at your flaws. Bring compassion and curiosity, and think about those parts of yourself that you don't like. Maybe you're someone who cries too easily. Maybe when you were a kid, every time you saw an ambulance go by when you were in the car with your dad, you started crying because you had this compassion for what you thought was happening with the person in the ambulance. And your dad yelled at you and said, "Don't be so sensitive." And so you have this sensitivity around that. Now, every time you hear a siren, you get kind of irritated and shut down, whatever your reaction is. But imagine that if your dad had been in a healed place where he could have reacted to your sensitivity. Now imagine you as a healed adult, a healed parent, and taking that healed parent to that part of you that you don't like, that sensitivity when other people are hurt, that need to cry and shed a few tears when you see someone hurting, the sensitivity you hate about yourself, bringing compassion and curiosity to that little kid who was, yelled at for being compassionate and sensitive. So I was joking about the flashlight just a little bit, but what is your light? Who is your anchor? I think about your German Shepherd. For me, throughout life, animals were often anchors for me.
Me
Um,
too.
healthy adults, like maybe an aunt or a teacher. And so I might invoke them to help me create what I think of as a healthy caregiver or adult. And so there are all these wonderful ways that you can find resourcing for yourself.
Exactly. And our
Yeah.
childhood can have a huge impact on us.
Hmm.
And we can learn so much from our parents, and they can have a huge impact on
Yeah.
us as well. And it was interesting.
Yeah.
That was funny how you just brought up the ambulance.
Mhm.
because that is something I was taught as a child. Um,
Mm.
it may go back to my grandparents actually, but at least my
Mhm.
parents is if there's an ambulance going past to say a prayer for the person
Mm.
that was hurt
Mhm.
and the people
Mhm.
that are going to help. And my
Mhm.
parents taught me that. I believe I don't say for sure, but I believe it was their parents. And just yesterday, I was driving with my 3-year-old and an ambulance went past. And that was the first time I said, let's say a prayer for the people that are hurting and the people that are
Mhm.
going to help.
Mhm.
Um, so that came to mind when you had said that.
So, do you mind if we take this moment? And one of the things that I work with clients is generational trauma. And so I do ancestral work.
Okay.
So I would like to take a moment
Yeah.
to honor your grandparents and your parents and you passing this compassionate act through your lineage, through your epigenetics, and behaviorally down through the line.
Oh, thank you.
It's so thank you to your grandparents for that gift.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, my both of my grandmothers, um, they're very strong women with strong faith. So I think our
Yeah.
families learned a lot from them, and they they did- yeah they were good women to look up to for sure.
Yeah, grandmothers are and aunties, that's community. That's and I'm going back to research, but they're showing that the reason why postmenopausal women survive is because we keep communities going with our knowledge and our support and our love. And yeah, so yay to the aunties and the grandmas.
Exactly. What would we
Yeah,
do without them?
I know.
How can healing our nervous system create healing for our whole body?
I love that. We've been talking about how it's the whole person, it's not head, body. Um, it's hard for me to separate anymore because I began this journey while I was in acupuncture school. I was flying down to Northern California every few months to do a somatic coaching program. It was before anyone was really talking about somatics. And we didn't call it somatics, we called it body, but we used a capital B. And the idea was to put the body and the body's desires and awareness of the body before the brain. What does my body want to do right now? What is my body sensing and feeling? And so that for me, that training started like over 20 years ago. And so I've been lucky enough to be able to put the consideration of the soma, the body, not ahead of the brain, but have as much say as the brain and the thoughts. Because what we see in trauma resolution, it's like a miracle happens. When someone's system resolves that trauma, say they finally realize that the car came from this direction and that's what's messing up their sleep and giving them anxiety, and they get to push back and resolve it. And afterwards, they might cry or shake. The trauma is released. Suddenly, that mask of trauma that's been keeping their body tight, that's been affecting their sleep, that has been causing pain in their shoulder, all of that starts to resolve because that emotional overwhelm, that terror has been sat, they've sat with it, they've held it, they've processed it, it's just gone from their system. So now their system wakes up and it's like their peripheral vision opens. The world seems a little more brightly colored. They sleep better, their digestion gets better. So I really feel tending to the body keeps the mental health healthy, and tending to the mental health and the brain and the thoughts keeps the body healthy. So I hope I answered your
Because
question. I feel like
we're
yeah,
all
I feel
connected,
like
right? Like it's the whole
yeah.
body. Like I believe
Hmm.
healing is mind, body, and soul. And if one is
Hmm.
hurting, it can impact the other parts.
Absolutely. And the other thing that happens after trauma is resolved, your memory opens up. So your executive functioning, a lot of it is kind of on the processing that happens in your brain that makes memories. That kind of goes offline with trauma. And there's a lot of details you don't remember because the neurological response to fight or flight is to narrow our vision. It shuts down other symptoms. It shuts down your digestive system. That's why a lot of people have digestive issues with trauma. Um, so all of this starts to get released and memories come back. Say you had that car accident, but you forgot that there was um, uh, the person in the ambulance driving you, the paramedic, made a joke with you and made you laugh, and you completely forgot about that joke and that paramedic, and then the memory comes back, and so you see the helpers, you see all the other events that happened around your accident, and in childhood trauma, when you start to resolve, dad yelled at me every time I cried when somebody was hurting. When you start to resolve that and bring in a healthier adult to help that part of you heal, you'll have a memory of maybe a school teacher that you completely forgot about. And this really kind school teacher who got down on the ground with you when you stepped on a bug by mistake and cried. And so you'll have this, it's almost like the brain follows the body. So when the trauma is resolved, that memory part, that executive functioning opens back up. And even a child who has had abuse and neglect will start to have good memories come back that were blocked by the trauma.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
What a
I've
gift.
experienced it and I've witnessed it in clients. It's just beautiful. That's the beauty of watching nervous systems resolve from trauma.
What a gift.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
And what advice do you have for people who are watching today
Mm.
who have chronic health problems, who have autoimmune diseases?
It's a really good question. Compassion, just so much self-compassion. Um, I want to address something that was really popular in pop psychology a few years ago. I heard a lot of people using the expression victim mentality. And it was used in a way that was gaslighting, spiritual bypassing, and quite honestly, ableist. If somebody is truly in pain every day of their lives, they're kind of a victim to their situation. And so my perception is you're not a victim, you're a hero. You are a bleepity bleep, I don't want to curse. You are a superhero. You deserve a cape. You're getting through every day in a world that was not built for your disability. And so we have a lot of people judging us when you're chronically ill. And so my advice is surround yourself with people who get it, people who understand what you're really going through. And yeah, you're going to have to spend time with people, maybe in the workplace, maybe in family relationships who don't get it, who don't have the bandwidth themselves. Just try to limit your time with them. But most of all, find ways to be compassionate yourself and to what you're going through. I've heard people say that they feel betrayed by their body. And I understand that, but I personally never felt betrayed by my body. I felt like, oh, poor body, you're inflamed, you're in pain. What can I do for you today, body? I do have anger and resentment with my limitations. I do have envy when able-bodied people can go to a Mardi Gras parade and I can't. So I do live with those emotions, but I've gotten better and better at surrounding myself. I love seeing the ear peek out.
Yeah, I
I'm
think she's
surrounding
getting it now.
myself with people and situations who support all the facets of what living with a chronic illness can be. Yeah.
Okay.
Love yourself. Love
Love
yourself
yourself.
first.
And when you're
Yeah.
loving yourself, if you're being attuned to yourself,
Mhm.
the capacity can start to grow. And from my understanding, the symptoms can start to soften.
Absolutely. And I really want to emphasize somatic therapy is not a cure. I still have migraines. I still have really bad days. However, my toolbox is huge now.
That makes sense.
So I know, okay, I'm in a lot of pain and I am really depressed today. I'm going to do Qigong. I'm going to do Qigong. I'm going to play my favorite song for the 100th time. And I'm going to feel my feelings. And I'm going to do what I have to do to feel better. And I think that's the secret, have different tools in your toolbox. And if you can't get somatic therapy because it's out of your price range, you don't have access in your area, do yoga, do a dance class, find ways, go for a walk, find ways to compassionately be with your symptoms, whether it's depression and anxiety from trauma or whether it's chronic illness symptoms from trauma. Find a way to be with your body in those moments that are the hardest.
I couldn't agree more. Is adding tools.
Mhm.
The more
Mhm.
tools we have, the easier our life can be.
Mhm.
And I provide a sliding scale to make sure everyone
Mhm.
can
Mhm.
afford it. Even if the person's low income, just to make sure, because I do believe everyone should be able to receive it
Mhm.
if they want it. Um,
Okay.
so I work in a way system that it depends on the person's income is how much they would be paying. Um, and what advice do you have for loved ones and family members that have a loved one with chronic health?
Yeah, this is so important. Unfortunately, my personal experience of having multiple sclerosis is I am not believed. I'm a dancer, I'm athletic, I do a lot of movement. I went to grad school. So people have this perception of me as healthy, but really on the inside, I'm inflamed, I'm in pain, I'm exhausted. Sometimes I'm pushing through a lot of mental fog to have a conversation with you. And so it's for people who are friends and in relationship relating to someone who's chronically ill, try to remember that behind everything, every conversation, every action that that chronically ill person is engaging in, they're having another conversation with their body. Like, how many spoons do I have? How much longer can I go on in this? What else do I have planned for today? And so just having compassion for eh, all of it. The bad moods come when your body feels bad. So having compassion. The other thing that I want to say, this is really, really important for those of you who love us with chronic illness. Take a break. Get away from us once in a while. Compassion fatigue is real. Oh my gosh. My best friend does not want to have another conversation about my migraines. She's over it. She's shown up for 5 of my migraines this year with some thaw and a cold pack. She just doesn't have bandwidth for it now. And so, as the chronically ill person, giving your loved one space to not have to deal with your chronic illness. And to those of you who love us, giving yourself space, maybe giving yourself a safe space to complain, like, I can't hear another conversation about Elaine's migraines. Not today. I'm having my own stuff. So, taking that space for your own overwhelm, your own stuff. It's hard to be in relationship with people who are chronically ill. And yeah, yeah. I hope that helps. Having
That's
compassion for
amazing.
yourself as well.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. You're
Compassion.
welcome.
Compassion can help
Mhm.
in many, many
Mhm.
different forms and
Mhm.
ways. And thank you. And Carl Jung,
Mhm.
analytical psychology. What is that?
So Jung kind of differs than traditional maybe psychology. And that's hard to say because he was there all along is what we know as psychology today was created. But he took it to a place that a lot of people think is woo-woo, but psyche means soul. And if we think of what African healers have told us, what American indigenous healers have told us, probably what those of us who have colonizer genes, what our ancestors would tell us is that mental illness is soul loss. A part of you is gone. And the miracle of watching someone resolve their trauma and watching their memory open, you're watching them return to themselves. They're returning to their own joy. And so, what I love about Carl Jung is he had this very perceptive understanding of the cycles of life by observing how people matured and aged. He had a really wonderful concept of how we're all interconnected. That's the collective unconscious. It explains why different cultures had the same thing going on. The pyramids in Egypt, while there were pyramids in Central America, happening around the same era. This is in the collective conscious. So we all have our psyche, we all have our unconscious. And so Jung was really interested in what shows up unconsciously. What is psyche hiding from us? What are we hiding from ourselves? And so there are things that are bigger than us. There is our history as humans, our history as mammals, our history archetypally and artistically and symbology. It all comes in. And he also had a connection to Chinese medicine and their understanding of how we're all connected, through the Tao, that we're all dependent on nature and we're a part of nature and the cycles of nature and like the cycles of the development of humans. And what I love about Jung most of all is that symptom is a way to access psyche. And so, at the crux of everything that I do in my personal healing is when physical symptom shows up and I sit with it and I ask it, what do you need? What are you trying to show me? That is symptom allowing me to access the unconscious or psyche, and some new information might come through by me simply paying attention to my spastic leg. I get a spastic leg in multiple sclerosis, especially after I run. It's why I don't run anymore. But after I swim, even I get spasticity. So I sit with it and I'm massaging it and I'm trying to unkink those tight muscles. And I just sit with it. And maybe suddenly I get the image of me as a kid running across the field and remembering the joy of that running. And that's what that muscle memory and that psychic memory wants to show me, the joy of running. Yeah, I hurt now, but remember the joy of running.
Mhm.
So,
And even
yeah.
using that memory as a resource,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And that's a very
Yeah.
common question we ask in body processing sessions is, what does that part
hmm
need? What is that part trying to tell us? And
hmm
listening and holding space. And that
hmm
can start to process our emotions and start to bring healing.
hmm
And what is Carl Jung's greatest advice?
That one's hard for me. I don't know if I really have an answer for that. He gave us so much. Honestly, I look at things culturally sometimes. I think in part because I study Chinese medicine, and there's a very different perspective about the whole body and how you treat the whole body and how our bodies are very connected to the cycles of the seasons and nature. And then we look at the Western kind of perspective and the Cartesian method, where Descartes separated the mind and body. He took soul away from mind when they needed to stay together, the masculine and the feminine. And so, what I love about Jung is he brought us alchemy. He brought us kind of the knowledge Europeans had before the Cartesian method separated. And so Jung brought us alchemy, but instead of looking for gold, what we're looking for is the actualization and the authenticity of who you truly are. That's the gold. And he borrowed a lot from the thinking of Chinese medicine and the Tao and some awareness of the pre Descartes methodology, bringing a wholeness back that I think we lost through the separation of mind, black and white science, and soul and woo woo. They go together. And I think he kind of broke some rules by saying we have to look at the whole thing. That's my interpretation of Jung.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
What is authentic movement?
Authentic movement, it's near and dear to my heart. Authentic movement was created by a dancer and a dance teacher who is also a Jungian analyst. She also had multiple sclerosis, so I feel kind of a soul connection. She noticed that some dancers showed up in movement and they weren't being their true selves. Maybe they were in entertainer mode, or I have to present a certain way. And that's very true among dancers. There's mirrors and we're taught how we look to an audience, but we're not always in tune to how we feel on the inside of our bodies. And so she created kind of a dance therapy called movement in depth. And she said that she could tell when a mover shifted out of that entertainer, I'm performing, and into their authentic self. And later, Janet Adler, Joan Chodorow, these were movement therapists who took authentic movement. They gave it the name movement in depth, changed it to authentic movement. But what it is, I'll describe it, and it's going to sound crazy, but it really works. A mover comes in, or several movers come in. You have a timed set. Maybe we're going to move for 10 minutes. The mover closes their eyes and they wait for a message from the body. They wait for the impulse to move and they follow the movement.
Hmm.
The witness watches both for the mover's safety because their eyes are closed, but they also are paying attention to what's happening in them as they watch the movement. And that's important too. And that's where that empathic resonance happens. That's where that dyadic relationship that you know about when you connect with a client and you feel their nervous system, the same thing's happening in authentic movement. I'm watching a mover. She's in her own story. She might be moving like this, and she's got her own story in her head of what's going on. I'm witnessing it, and I'm witnessing this movement, and then I have my own story of what's going on. 10 minutes, the movement wraps up, the mover comes to a close, the mover and witness sit. The mover shares her experience. There's this moment when I was moving like this, and I remember being underwater and playing with my brother as a kid. The witness, on the other hand, does not judge, does not critique, and most of all, does not interpret this movement. Instead, the witness might say, there was this moment where you were doing this, and I just felt happy in my body. So, what happens in that moment? The mover's psychic embodied experience, which is really similar to what's happening in children when they're playing, that imaginal space is being witnessed and held. And so when the witness reflects back to the mover, this is what I experienced witnessing you. That mover's healing that happened in that meditation gets validated and concretized by the witness. And the witness remains open to their own experience by watching another. So, authentic movement taps into psyche through body movement, but it's by putting body first. There's no choreographer, there's no teacher, there's no instruction. So, I used it in my study with women who have multiple sclerosis because I studied yoga, I studied five rhythms, I studied all these different movement meditation modalities, I studied Gaga. But what I wanted for people who don't feel like they're fully within their own knowing, I wanted them to have an internal locus of control. And so when you move from desire from body rather than a choreographer or a teacher, that brings back some authority and authenticity to your own lived experience rather than having someone on the outside tell you how to move. So that's authentic movement. I hope that
That
made
sounds
sense.
amazing.
Yeah, it sounds kind of woo-woo. And I always, for myself and everyone I know, the first few times you do it, it feels very awkward and weird. And then you'll have a moment where you'll drop into your authentic self and you'll be with your imagination. And you might be a kid playing with like tractors in the sand, like you did as a kid, or you might be living out this whole fantasy of a conversation you're having with your mother, whatever it is, but you're in it. And then you come out of it, and there's a moment of reconciliation and everything coming back into coherence and healing. It's beautiful.
That sounds amazing. To me, it doesn't sound woo-woo. Like, but maybe because of embodied processing, I know
Hmm.
when we're in the body, or any
Hmm.
somatic sessions, really, when we're in the body and we're processing our emotions, if we're listening to our body may want to make a movement, and that can help process our emotions. So
Hmm.
it sounds, I can relate because of that. And to me, that's not
Yeah.
woo woo. No, and how can people find out more information about that?
They can contact me through my website. I'm sort of one of that's my expertise is authentic movement. And I have a few clients who I do authentic movement with. It's such a new, at least in New Orleans, there aren't a lot of people who've
Or there
heard of it
isn't.
or do it.
Okay. So there's not like
And
dance
so
studios or anything that does it.
no, there are a lot of people on the West Coast and East Coast. You can type in authentic movement. You can take classes. I highly recommend taking classes with Daphne Lowell. Alton Wasson are amazing contemplative dance and authentic movement dance teachers. There are teachers all over the world. Tina Stromstad does workshops in Italy. I think she occasionally does workshops in California. They're scattered. If you just type authentic movement in, you might be able to find someone close by. It is something I can do on Zoom with clients if they're interested. Um, and it works just as well. It's an amazing, and there's a lot of literature out there on authentic movement, but it's not very well known outside of kind of dance therapy and Jungian, because it's very Jungian circles. So I love that it's getting out there to all the
Okay.
other
Yeah,
movement
no, I
people.
love it. I have never,
Yeah.
like, I hadn't heard of it, but now that you speak
Hmm.
of it, and I'm not a person who's really into woo woo, but
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I don't think sounds yo, or not yo.
Woo woo.
Woo woo, thank you to me. Um, just I guess maybe because I can relate from somatic sessions, and
Absolutely.
you could even practice this at home with a friend. It sounds like a bit.
You could. The
If I
problem
guess if
is that
you're used
yeah,
to going into the
yeah,
body, it would be hard if you've never done it
yeah.
and you don't
They
know at
don't.
all.
So a caveat that I really want to emphasize, you shouldn't witness until you've moved for a year.
Okay. So somatic
Or
practitioners could try this,
yeah,
but if you
yeah,
haven't
absolutely.
gone
And
into
the
the
other thing,
body and have the
yeah, yeah.
experience.
It's not just that witnessing takes some expertise. It gets it's really hard to get out of the conditioning of trying to analyze a person's movement, especially if you know them. So it's not always great to do with friends. "Oh, I know
Mhm.
you did this movement because you were trying to brush away that argument with your mother."
Right.
No, that wasn't what it was at all. And now eh, you've ruined their authentic movement by putting your own impression on
Oh, and
top
your
of it.
impression on it because you feel like you know
So,
the person. You're like, I know
yeah,
what you're doing. And it could be
yeah,
from their childhood and they're doing something completely different.
exactly.
So it's really being present and
Exactly.
holding space and just allowing the person, right? Not just guessing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You nailed it. Mhm.
And how can
And so
this,
that's why they want you to move with it yourself so that you're having the experience of the imaginal and being
I
with
want
your
to try it.
body. All right.
Okay.
I want to come
And
back to Canada, so I'll come up and do some sessions in Ontario with y'all.
perfect. Thank you. Let me know when you do and I'll set up a class.
All right.
So how can this bring healing for people?
Authentic movement. But again, it's like somatic experience. It's like all the somatic practices, all the dance practices, the yoga practices that are so popular right now. It returns your internal locus of control. So one of the topics that we didn't really get into was boundaries and all the boundary violations that happen in trauma. So authentic movement, internal locus of control, I keep saying that, and just to define it, it means a sense of authority within yourself, that you're not looking outside yourself for how you're feeling or for people to tell you what you're thinking. You know, you have that foundation. And so authentic movement returns that to you. Oh, I'm having this experience. This is my experience. That's the authenticity. You're with your stuff and you're having this outside witness with compassion and curiosity watch you have the experience. And like how when you have a somatic session, just you as the compassionate therapist, you're holding space for your client's trauma. It's the same thing in authentic movement. As a witness, I'm holding space for this person to have this psychic somatic experience. And because we're mammals and because we resonate by being witnessed compassionately, that's what's happening. It's there's something beautiful in the healing. You know, your clients, when they heal with your witnessing, it's the same with authentic movement. This person has witnessed me have this transcendent experience. Yeah.
Amazing.
Kind of
Well,
validates it, I guess. Yeah.
okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And one last question. What advice do you have for everyone watching today?
Mm, I say this to myself every day because I still have really hard days and really hard moments. Compassion and curiosity for yourself and for everyone around you. You're triggered by something, compassion for yourself in the trigger, and maybe later coming back with a little curiosity. Why was I triggered? So that's my advice to everyone always compassion and curiosity.
Thank you. And the curiosity when we're triggered. A trigger is not necessarily a bad thing because
Yeah.
it's the way to
Mm-mm.
healing. If our triggers are
Mhm.
talking to us, and if we
Mhm.
can listen to our triggers and become curious, that's a way to start to heal.
Mhm. Absolutely. I have a favor to ask.
Sure.
So, would you share a gesture with me
Yeah.
about how you're doing right now? And I'll go first. So, I'm going to do a gesture about how this interview has gone for me.
Okay.
And then I would like you to do it with me the second time.
Okay.
And then if you would do a gesture, show me how this interview is going for you, and then I'll do the gesture again with you. Does
Okay,
that feel okay?
that sounds good.
Okay, so thank you.
Okay. And then for me,
Well, can we do that again? I want to do it with you.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I forget what I did, but I went like this.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, I'll just move with you so that you can see me witnessing you and moving with you. Yeah. You did this beautiful.
I tried to go into the body and just listen. So
Felt the resonance. I felt so much resonance when you in my own space. Just yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that
it was that
gesture.
headspace. That's where I forgot. I'm like, what did I do? Because I was yes, it was that
I know.
listening to
You were in it. You were being authentic.
my authentic self. So thank you so much. It was an honor
Thank
to have
you.
you. And if you do come to Ontario, please, yes, reach out. And I'd love to
Yeah.
set something up, maybe with a
Yeah.
small group or something. That would be amazing.
It
So
would be
I know
awesome.
there's
Thank you
probably a
for
few
everything.
Canadians I can think at the top of my head that would love to try it out.
Yeah, I would love it. Thank you. Thank you so much for today.
It was an honor to have you.
Merci.
Thank
Au
you.
revoir.
Have a great time in on your travels.
Thank you. I can't wait. Bye.
Bye now.